What is the difference between a divorce and a legal separation in New York State? And, this is a question that I get pretty frequently as a divorce attorney in New York State. So I think, over the years, I found a way to describe it or explain it that breaks it down into its individual bits. And that's what we're going to do today. So first, we're going to talk about what's a legal separation in New York State. And a legal separation in New York State can be two things. First, it can be a judge-signed order of separation or judgment of separation. This used to be in play in the 1950s and 60s and prior to many of the divorce laws that we have today, and back when divorce used to be very, very complicated to obtain. And then the second type of legal separation is a separation agreement. And a separation agreement is a binding contract in New York State, and it's enforceable as a contract. And the idea behind the contract is that you and your spouse are settling all issues as between the two of you that you want to put into that document. So in theory, it should cover all issues between the two of you in order to truly be a legal separation. And that means that it has to cover the ancillary issues of custody, child support, maintenance, property and debt division, as well as counsel fees. Now, a legal separation agreement, again, is a binding contract. And so, a lot of people wonder, what in the world do I mean about that? So when I say a legal separation agreement is a binding contract, what I mean is just that. So it's enforceable in courts that have unlimited jurisdiction in New York State. It is not enforceable in limited jurisdiction courts, which is a family court in New York State. So a separation agreement is a binding legal document, enforceable as a contract, in the courts that can enforce contracts. Courts with limited jurisdiction in New York State can't enforce contracts. That's why they have limited jurisdiction. And limited jurisdiction courts in New York State are family court. There's other limited jurisdiction courts, but that's the one that's most relevant to this inquiry, because I think a lot of people misunderstand the fact that when you have a legal separation agreement, or just really a separation agreement, you can't just go to family court and enforce it. It's a contract and it is enforceable, but it's enforceable as a contract in Supreme Court. And that is a very, very big difference and something that people really need to understand. So when we're talking a separation agreement is a contract in New York State, and it can only be enforceable as a contract in Supreme Court. It cannot be enforceable in family court. Now, how can you make that document enforceable in all courts in New York State? Well, you can do that by making it into a judgment of divorce. And in New York State, making a separation agreement into a judgment of divorce can be done by a relatively simple process for an uncontested divorce. But we're going to get to that in the next part of this video. First, I just want to be incredibly clear that when we are talking about a separation agreement, we are talking about a legal contract that can be enforced, but only in specific courts. So if this contract addresses child support, custody, maintenance, you're probably going to want to get that into some sort of an order of the court as soon as possible, because otherwise you don't have an enforceable order for every single court in New York State. You just have a contract. Contracts are enforceable, but they are enforceable via a means that is a little bit complicated and certainly not something that a person without an attorney can easily do themselves. Okay, so I've kind of waxed poetic about legal separation agreements or separation agreements. Now let's get back to the heart of the question. What is the difference between a divorce and a separation agreement or a legal separation in New York State? And the difference is that if you have a separation agreement, you're still considered married in the eyes of the state and federal government. You're also considered married in the eyes of the mortgage that you guys might have jointly, the credit cards that you might have jointly, or jointly titled property. You're still considered married. And so that comes with it a realm of complications and implications. So for example, taxes. If you have a signed separation agreement in New York State, you're still considered married. So you're still filing taxes as a married couple, either jointly or filing separately. And there's other things too. Certainly if you're living under a separation agreement or you have a separation agreement, you can get health insurance still as a spouse because You're still spouses. But that's the main difference between a divorce decree and a separation agreement or legal separation. You're still considered married, so you can still inherit like a spouse. You can still file taxes as a married couple, or you have to note yourselves as filing separately, and you can still get health insurance benefits. Now, the additional thing to be aware of with a judgment of divorce is that a judgment of divorce is enforceable in every single court in New York State, and it also is enforceable in other states, just like a contract, but it is much broader reaching in terms of enforceability. It's also an easier document to enforce because you have the ability to go to two different courts, at least in New York State, two different courts in order to enforce it. So when you're talking about the difference between a judgment of divorce and a separation agreement, the first thing you need to understand is the enforceability. A judgment of divorce is a court order, and it can be enforced in any court in New York State. A separation agreement is a contract. It is enforceable as a contract, but it's only enforceable in Supreme Court. So it's a little bit more complicated in order to enforce it. It is enforceable, but it's a little bit more complicated. And then the second thing to be aware of is that with a judgment of divorce, you are divorced. You're no longer spouses. So that means health insurance ends, tax status, you're no longer considered married for tax filing purposes. And you're in possession of a document that can be easily enforced. That's the judgment of divorce. Under the separation agreement in New York State, in any state under a separation agreement, you are married still. So you're still filing taxes, noting marital status. You are still potentially able to claim the other person as a spouse on health insurance. And again, enforceability is a little more complicated. So are there reasons why somebody might want to sign a separation agreement and live under that separation agreement? Absolutely. And there are instances in my career where I've done exactly that. Typically, I suggest that it's for a very short time, and the reasons for that vary significantly from case to case. But I personally don't like to see people living under a separation agreement for any longer than really like 6 months if I can avoid it. And again, the reasons why are kind of complicated, but the simplest way to understand it is just that it gets sticky when you're living under a separation agreement for any length of time. There are persons who I've assisted through a divorce process who are older. They're in their 60s, their 70s. They're not looking to get remarried. And they're fine to live under a separation agreement because of the health insurance benefits. And sometimes there are very good reasons why you're going to live under that separation agreement. But it's pretty rare. And so if you're thinking, let's sign an agreement and just live under it for a period of time, you absolutely want to talk that through with an attorney. Okay, so let's do a bit of a summary. Why would somebody live under a separation agreement instead of moving forward to a divorce? Well, you may want to get insurance through your spouse for a period of time. In that instance, you can do that under a separation agreement because you are still considered married. You're definitely going to want to talk to your attorney about what complications this can create living under a separation agreement for a period of time. But that is one reason why you might want to live under a separation agreement. Another reason why you might want to live under a separation agreement is because it's not as final as a judgment of divorce. Because it's not as final as a judgment of divorce, it's a little clunky to live under that separation agreement. You're still considered married in the eyes of the state and federal government, so you're still filing taxes as a married couple, and enforceability can be really complicated. But that is another reason why you might consider a separation agreement versus a judgment of divorce. But those things aside, in my experience, it tends to make a lot of sense to move forward to that judgment of divorce. Yes, it's scary, right? Because it is the unknown. But if you have a separation agreement, the judgment of divorce really isn't an unknown because the terms of that judgment of divorce are going to be what the terms of your separation agreement are. So really, that judgment of divorce represents finality. And that can be a good thing, potentially a bad thing. but it is absolutely something that gives a lot of benefits in terms of enforceability of that order as an order in every single court in New York State, and also the fact that you're no longer considered married in the eyes of the state or federal government. So for tax purposes, insurance purposes, and honestly, agreements as to third parties, mortgages, debts, things that are held in joint names like a house. There's a lot of benefits to having that finality of a judgment of divorce. I hope this video was very helpful to you. If you have any questions, of course, just reach out. We're happy to give you more individualized legal advice at any point.